Our guest to start this segment is Michael Mood. He is Jefferson County Commissioner-elect. And when he ran the Middleway district was the district from which he ran. Of course, you represent all the people in the county when you run, but you, because of the whole districting thing, you limit so many people can run from a district or serve from a district. Michael Mood is associated with the Middleway district, which is very timely for what's going on right now with Sidewinder and the water issues in that district. Michael, good morning. Thanks for coming in. Please move a little closer to your mic and pull that closer to you as well there.
Good morning.
Great to have you, sir.
Good morning.
When do you actually take office, Mike?
I take office in January.
And you'll be replacing Jane Tabb?
That is correct, yes.
And the other commissioners who ran, they assumed seats immediately?
That's correct. Once the election was certified, they were sworn in and took office.
All right. And I presume that you're still keeping up with everything that's going on in Jefferson County and what will eventually be your commission seat.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
And the Middleway district is yours. These are your people, basically.
Yes.
Yeah, and your involvement in this situation, I know, has included several meetings, including one recently with Sidewinder.
That is correct. Yeah, I met with them yesterday.
Yeah. What was that meeting about, and what took place?
So one of the meetings, we've had two with them. They were telling me about their project and what could they do to help the community. And the first meeting was more as fire chief from Middleway. They wanted to see what the fire services needs were. Initially, we were talking about hydrants in their facility and adjacent to their facility that are connected to Berkeley County water. Once we saw that they were actually piping the water over from Lake Louise, I changed the ask to them to have fire hydrants on their entire pipeline. Mm-hmm. And the purpose for that is to improve public safety in Middleway. And in doing that, we can also help reduce the ISO ratings to the residents in that area. The ISO ratings are what insurance bases your homeowner's insurance on.
What does ISO stand for?
It's Insurance Services Organization, I do believe. So Middleway and everybody in Jefferson County is a split number. One is a hydranted area, one is a non-hydranted area. Middleway currently has one fire hydrant on the Berkeley County line at Route 51. So what that does is that really restricts the fast ability to supply water in the event of a house fire. And that adversely affects people's insurance rates. So you have what's called a 6/9. Most areas are a 9 because they are less protected because you have to truck the water in. If we can increase fire hydrants, then we can work to reduce the insurance cost to the consumers. I have talked with an insurance agent and had a comparison quote done on one of their customers that is in that 9 area, that the line will go past their house. That'll then put a fire hydrant within 1,000 feet of their house. That's to get that customer a 22.5% drop in their homeowner's insurance rate. So I went back to Sidewinder and said, this is what the insurance company can do for customers along this route. Would you put them along the entire route? They very quickly said, absolutely yes, let's meet and talk about it. And that was the meeting we had yesterday to actually lay out the fire hydrant location from the water pickup site in Lake Louise all the way to the plant.
Now, in meeting with Stacy Chapman, she didn't mention that rates were a concern in regards to homeowners insurance, but she did mention that amount of water would be a concern. Mm-hmm. Would this plant affect residents' water supplies, both in quantity and in safety?
It could. So when you're talking about water and you're talking about wells, the underground is unknown. We could all be in the same pocket of water. We could be in small pockets of water. We could be in larger pockets of water, and they're all interconnected. So absolutely, it is a concern. And I understand their concern, and I agree with their concern. It's a huge unknown. I'd like to see more on the study to see how they picked up the water, where they dumped the water, and what the results were on Lake Louise. Did it drop any? My understanding, it did not, but I'd like to see where they were dumping the water as they pumped it out.
And I was told, and I don't know how reliable this is, but I was told that the water was effectively being pumped out of the lake and then returned to the lake, which would indicate to me that there would be no drop in the water supply.
Correct. So, and I heard that as well. I've heard two different versions of it. I heard one of that exact one, and if that's the case, that's a very flawed study. I heard that there was 2 that were done. The first one was dumping back to Lake Louise. The second was dumping to Turkey Run. Dumping to Turkey Run is the exit of the lake. So if it's dumping to the exit of the lake, and there is no change in surface water, that to me is a more valid study. If they're dumping right back to it, that's just recirculating water most likely. And because we don't know where Lake Louise is underneath and where they're picking up from, like I said, that could just be a recirculation.
Mike, another concern is this toxic plume under the old 3M plant. Is that a legitimate concern in your eyes?
Oh, it absolutely is a legitimate concern. The toxic plume, I've seen it on the map, and it looks to be relatively small compared to their entire property, but it is on what I would call the southeastern corner of their property, which is closer to the village. So I'd like to learn more on that toxic plume. Is it a solid? Is it a liquid? If they start pumping over at Lake Louise and you start dropping the water table and you move water from that direction back towards Lake Louise, does any of that get moved? So I do think there should be some sort of ground monitoring around that to see if there's changes in that plume.
John Gilstrap.
There's a lot about this, excuse me, that just confuses me. Sidewinder is essentially a middleman, right?
Correct,
as I understand
yes.
it. And we don't know what the company is that's actually moving in. Is that right?
So my understanding of it is, you're correct, they are still looking for somebody to sell the water to.
Okay, but the bottling plant itself that's not Sidewinder. The bottling plant itself
I don't have that exact information,
Right.
Whether it's them that will own the plant and operate it and sell to somebody else, or are they going to build and lease to somebody else. So I don't have that answer.
So the levels of secrecy here I find just to be troubling. And then the unknown factors, like, well, we don't know if there's enough water to sustain this. And actually, having been in the environmental reclamation business for a long time, monitoring is fine to know that you've got a problem. Mm-hmm. But it's best not to cause the problem. So when we have this situation of stasis now with the toxic plume, TCE is a bad chemical. I mean, it's a known carcinogen.
Right.
And I don't know. It just seems to me that that there's this momentum behind this project that nobody's all that enthusiastic about. Certainly not we've had in here. I guess it's sort of confirmation bias there. And then we hear, well, there's really nothing we can do to stop it if it moves ahead. Is that your sense of it?
So I've heard from a lot of different sides on it. There is a small side that is very upset, very concerned. And I do think that their concerns are valid. There's other sides that are like, this is okay, it's fine. And then there are other sides that just are completely oblivious.
Well, I think on average people are pretty, I don't mean that as an insult, but I don't think people pay all that close attention to what's going on. They're depending on the elected officials to do that on their behalf.
Yes.
So there's a question in here somewhere. I'm just not sure what it is. I find all of this to be so startling. And 1.7 million gallons a day is not a trivial amount to find out, oh, well, do we or don't we have $1.7 million gallons available to us? I read somewhere, I guess it was when Stacey was in here, that's the equivalent of 5,000 homes, mm-hmm. The equivalent, what they would use. So
Mr. Doyle.
Yeah, Mike, to follow up on these questions. One, I'm going to make a suggestion to you as the incoming county commissioner. The U.S. Geological Survey has a science center for every state. And the one for West Virginia is based in Charleston, but it has one branch, which is in Leetown, at USGS in Leetown. Okay. And all over the country, they do groundwater surveys for local communities, for counties, cities, even homeowners associations, for not a whole lot of money. I do think it would behoove us to know how much water we have.
I agree.
I mean, not just for this issue, but for going into the future for any proposal.
I completely agree.
Yeah, so I would suggest that when you're on the commission, suggest the county commission contact the Leetown Science Center and say, can we work out on a groundwater study here, and you all do it for a reasonable price for us. Now, with that in mind, I would think it would behoove the Planning Commission to say to Sidewinder, we're going to deny your application until such time as we get this survey, as we get this groundwater survey. And 6 months from now, a year from now, I doubt it would take longer than that, but I don't know. I'm not, John Gilstrap, you would know better than me how long such a survey might take, but...
I have, under this circumstance, I really don't.
Okay, all right. But at any rate, I do think they are, that the Planning Commission could say, hey, we're going to hold off on deciding this until we get this. Another concern that I have, which I've talked to a lot of people, and I was not able to attend that last big meeting on this, that the public hearing on the first public hearing the Planning Commission held. I'll be at the next one on December 17th. I think the Planning Commission should say to Sidewinder, we're not going to approve your request unless you put a road from your location straight to 51. So your traffic doesn't go through the village of Middleway. I think that would go a long way toward easing the concerns of some of the people I've talked to.
They're having a lot of concerns about that. And I did ask that question and looked at some of the mapping, and there just doesn't seem to be a possible route to do that.
They got to, I mean, it might take a little longer than they want, but it might not be a straight road, but surely they can figure out some way to do that. I've looked at the map too, and it looks like there are a couple of ways they could do that to avoid the village of Middleway. It's not all that far from 51.
Well, yeah, but there's a lot of properties between that and 51 that are not owned by them.
Well, that is true. That is true.
And I did also look at coming out of there and the possibilities of the old bridge that had been removed going over the Opequon to come out and go out Bunker Hill Road and have that bridge rebuilt. But that takes you into a very narrow area and windy area right out into Berkeley County. It doesn't give you a good route to 51 either.
But maybe you could straighten that road out once you get into Berkeley County and get it to 51.
There's a lot of property between their site and 51.
That's true, but I concede it probably would include working with the Division of Highways, doing condemnation, to get the road there. And I think the Planning Commission could say to Sidewinder, until you get this worked out so that you avoid Middleway, we're not going to approve you. And this leads me to another one. And I don't know, you're not on the county commission yet, so you maybe have not experienced this. I have talked to people who have said that Nathan Cochran, the county attorney, always advises the county commission and the planning commission that whatever is requested, they have to vote to approve it. I would say we're at 6s and 7s here. If that is true, we don't have zoning. Because in this particular case, what Sidewinder is proposing is not a conforming use for that particular zone. So I would think if we really have zoning, the Planning Commission could turn it for that reason alone.
For which particular zone are you referring? The site itself or the site they're trying to pick up from?
Well, in both cases. I guess probably the site itself would be a conforming use because it's got a history.
Correct.
But yes, but the expanded part, yeah, thank you very much, for correcting me there, yeah.
Yeah, so it is two different sites that are being linked together by a pipeline, and the county doesn't regulate the water. That's the kind of odd spot about that is that's actually controlled by the state. And yes, you are correct that Nathan has, and I've heard him say this before, that that if it matches this, you're going to have to approve it. And if it meets code, how do you deny it?
Well, and the answer
tends to put us into a pretty expensive legal battle. if we start denying things that meet code.
If they meet code, but if they're not a conforming use.
Who's the ultimate determinant in regards to whether something's a conforming use or not? Mike, do you know yet, or John?
Well, the zoning map.
Is it the county attorney, though, who interprets the zoning map?
I would tend to agree.
I guess so, but if what I have heard is that he goes farther than that. That even if it is a non-conforming use, you have to approve it if it meets code.
Well,
so,
according to Jefferson County Foundation.org, big orange highlight here, groundwater extraction is not listed as a permitted land use in any zone in Jefferson County zoning and land development ordinance.
I believe Stacy mentioned that in her appearance on Monday as well.
So I mean,
that's correct, because the county doesn't control the water. That's a
state
natural resource. That's a state issue.
And that leads us to another interesting question. A number of years ago, a bill authored by then State Senator John Unger got through that declared that the water in West Virginia is the property of the people of West Virginia. And that's what makes it a state resource. Mm-hmm. But the state has declined to do any regulation at the state level. So it's totally unregulated at the state level. And last year, the legislature passed a bill which was sent to the legislature by the Farm Bureau, which prohibits counties from regulating water. Mm-hmm. So if the state doesn't regulate it and the county can't regulate it, even though it's the property of the state, where are we?
Well, this is, again, it gets back to what I was saying before in terms of the secrecy and where my BS bell is just clanging in my head. If this company, whoever the ultimate company is, if they want to have a lot of water, we got a big river where you can stick a pipe into the river and you can suck water out. I don't understand what the importance of, because with the karst topography, it's less, I won't say less stable. Structurally, it's less stable than other kinds of aquifers. So why here? What is it about Middleway, this particular site, and the water that is under there that is worth taking this risk? Not for the company itself. For the company, that's about doing what companies do. But for the locals, for the people who live here, it just seems that there's a much larger downside than there is an upside. Even if this place employs a couple hundred people, with that comes other things. But water, man, it's hard to think of a more important resource than water.
Oh, I don't disagree with you. The water is a very valuable resource, and if this gets messed up, it can affect thousands and thousands of people. So I do agree that there needs to be a lot more monitoring of wells. And I think that their pickup site on their wells should be much shallower than the average well depth. So if the water level does start to drop, they're the first ones that will be out, not others. Typically, now I know some of the wells in Middleway, I've been told, are quite shallow. The average, when a well company drills a well, their starting number is 200 feet. And they typically set pumps at the 150, 160 depth. If they were to be able to set theirs at the 75 or 100, if the water level starts dropping in the aquifer, they would be the first ones out. And I think that we should be monitoring the wells in the vicinity of that. And I think we should be monitoring wells further out from it, because it is potentially one big pocket of water.
And that just puts an extra burden of stress, if nothing else, on the people. You wake up in the morning, you turn on the faucet, you want to have water.
I agree.
You don't want to worry about the monitor that's been put in your well to make sure that you have water. I just don't understand the upside of this for the
correct.
county.
And I don't think the monitor should be something that the person should be monitoring. I think that should be something that the company's monitoring, that their reports are coming out from that. And they're, again, setting their pumps at a much more shallow level. They'd be the first ones out. But I think that should be something that's available, reports to the public, what the static groundwater level is. And I think that should be something that's available to the public so that they know that there either is or is not an effect from this, because there are a massive number of users in that area. While it is very rural, it's farmland. You've got farmers that need that for not only their houses, they need it for their farming. They need it for their cattle. They need it for their sod farm. They need it for their corn or whatever else they're having to irrigate. So it is something that is very serious, and we do need to pay attention to.
2 minutes left here. Mike, what's the next step on this?
So it goes back to the Planning Commission. They've done their second request for that. It'll go back to the Planning Commission. There is on the, I believe it's 17th.
17th.
Right, correct.
Right.
The next meeting coming up for that. And I think it's going to go to that, and they're going to review it again and see, does it meet what they've asked for? Because at this point, it's just a concept plan. Concept plans are a very early plan, and that's why a lot of the information isn't out yet, because it's just the preliminary phases of it.
As the fire chief in Middleway, are you concerned about the water supply to fight fires if this plant is pulling 1.7 million gallons of water out daily?
So I'm more concerned about trying to get hydrants in here to be able to provide better protection to the people of Middleway, because currently we're trucking all of our water in, and having hydrants in here will be better for the community and be able to provide suppression efforts much faster than having to rely on fire tankers to actually move that amount of water.
And in your meetings with Sidewinder, you had mentioned off air you thought that they were good people trying to do the right thing.
They seem to be so far. And I've also offered the firehouse as a place for them to be able to do an open house, so they can come out and talk about their project with the citizens. And they liked that idea. They haven't set a date yet to request to do that, but we'll make the station available because it's got plenty of room for people to be able to come down, and they can set up and talk about what they're doing and what they can do for the community.
Mike Mood, I appreciate you coming in this morning. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Michael Mood, Jefferson County Commissioner-elect.